Hey, what's good, everybody? Welcome into this UFC 290 preview. Our, four cornermen looking ahead at International Fight Week's main event, the main card at UFC 290. Myself, Phil Murphy. We got Brett, we got Marc, we got Carlos, and we got Alexander Volkanovski, Brett, in the main event. First time in his UFC career, we're seeing him rebound off of a loss. Given the fact that it was up a weight class, what are your expectations for now Volk looking to reestablish himself at featherweight and defend his belt?
Regardless of what had happened in his last fight, I would expect a professional performance by Volkanovski, because that is just who this man is. You know, he is just professional in every sense of the word. That's why I think so many of us are so darn impressed with Alexander Volkanovski. He just checks every box, man. He is mentally, psychologically, physically, strategically always so prepared for all of these fights. I would say that even a guy like that, had the loss been very demoralizing, had the loss been he wanted to move up to 155 for a long time and then went up and just had zero success and was just manhandled by Makhachev, I suppose maybe I would say, hey, this might be a possibility where you could see just a little bit of a lackluster effort just because he had this big dream and it went so poorly. But if anything, man, I think he is so reinvigorated to just take care of business at 145 and set it up again with 155. Like, I think going into that, we all would have said, like, hey, if Alex loses, this is probably like a one-time thing. This is probably only going to be an opportunity for him to go up and challenge Islam Makhachev one time. But then the fight went the way in which it did. And all of a sudden, man, like, this guy could fight Islam again before the end of the year. So I think he's going to be extremely motivated. I think, you give any type of athlete like him little things to work on, little tiny nuances that he wants to play with. I'm expecting Alex Volkanovski, man, the professional, the arguably, depending on who you talk to, either the number one or number two greatest fighter in the world right now. That is who I'm expecting at UFC 290.
It is something of a sizable favorite. Carlos, I want to talk to you because you talked to Ilia Topuria, who was not his opponent this weekend, but somebody who impressed a lot of people who are looking at this featherweight division. Alex is 34. He'll be 35 in September. That's when we see a lot of guys start to hit the wall in the smaller weight classes. But from your conversation with Ilia Topuria and what Alex Volkanovski said elsewhere, how much do you think the fact that it seems to be this almost new wave of contenders, this fresh blood for him to challenge, might help serve as further motivation for the champion?
Oh, he's definitely a motivation. I've seen a couple of interviews where he talks about Topuria, and then he even said that he thought he was even higher ranked. He didn't know he was only on the ninth spot. He probably will be in the top 5 after the Emmett win. And I Topuria might be ready for the title shot. I mean, he will probably have to go over Ortega or Max Holloway, depending on the schedule, depending on what happens between Yair and Volkanovski. But he looks ready for the title shot. So I think Volkanovski has that motivation of having a new contender. Is the same with Yair, because he's been saying that he likes the different challenge that Yair brings, because he's not a heavy boxer. His striking is completely different. He's coming from a submission win against Eman, and he even tried to submit Brian Ortega, who's one of the best jiu-jitsu practitioners in the whole 45 division. So I think he's excited for these two new challenges. But obviously, the way I will say that I would agree with Brett. The way that the fight with Makhachev happened, he feels he wins something there. Even he didn't got the second belt. Is in somehow is a victory for him, because the discussion for the pound for pound is still there. No one said that Makhachev is the best pound for pound after that fight. A lot of people saw Volkanovski even winning three rounds in that fight. So I think he has this combination of the motivation to earn that fight against Makhachev again, and then this couple of new challengers that he haven't faced, like Yair and Topuria, who's not right now in the best spot to be the contender. So I think he has a lot of motivation to perform on 290. I've seen his videos, or the way he's studying Yair, the late guard that he has when he's on his back especially in the Emmett fight, the way he's practicing for his guard switch from Sopa to right guard. So I think he's really motivated, and he's not taking Yair for granted or anything like that.
Well, the bookmakers do have Yair as a 3-1 underdog. Marc Raimondi, what do you think it would take for Yair Rodriguez to be the one to dethrone Alex Volkanovski at featherweight?
Yeah, I mean, it would be easy for a champion like Volkanovski to overlook a guy like Yair Rodriguez, considering the odds, especially after seeing how good Topuria just looked, right, against Emmett. I mean, he looked just incredible in that fight. But Yair Rodriguez is just not the guy that you want to overlook because he's so unpredictable. He's so unorthodox. He can beat you in so many different ways. And I mean, just ask Korean Zombie. I mean, you're not safe against Yair Rodriguez until the final horn of the final round of that fight. And I think that's what Alexander Volkanovski has to worry about. And it's not going to be an easy, road for Yair because Volkanovski is 1, 2, whatever you want to say, best pound for pound fighter in the world. But Rodriguez kind of brings something to the table that very few people do. He's not going to be like anything that Volkanovski has necessarily seen in that division. He's not a Max Holloway. He's not an Islam Makhachev. He is, he's coming at you from all angles. He's incredibly athletic. He's fast. He has power in his punches, in his legs. I mean, in his elbows. I mean, it's like, he's just like a Tasmanian devil, and he's become so much more polished over the last few years, where he can use those weapons more patiently and he can use those weapons more efficiently than maybe he did earlier in his career. And just a really dangerous guy, and not a guy that you can overlook, even if there's a big fight against Makhachev, the rematch coming up next, even if there's a big fight against Topuria coming up. Yair Rodriguez is the guy standing in front of him, UFC 290, and that's the guy that he has to be worried about. And it's Volkanovski. I think he will be, but Yair is an unpredictable guy, so we'll see.
And if Yair is able to pull the upset and Brandon Moreno wins in the co-main event, we have 3 undisputed champions who call Mexico home, a country with a proud boxing history and a significantly growing MMA footprint, I guess. Marc, with Brandon Moreno's already success and the fact that he was a guy who was, one of the last picks on Tough and cut from the UFC, what do you make of, I guess, his star power and the collective star power of some of these Mexican champions or interim champions in Yair Rodriguez's case, and how much can Brandon Moreno improve upon that if he beats Alexandre Pantoja in the co-main event at UFC 290?
I think Brandon Moreno has a chance, if he's not already one of the biggest stars in the UFC, especially internationally. I was with Brandon Moreno and Ilia Topuria, actually, coincidentally enough, last September in Spain. They were over there with a collaboration between the UFC and La Liga in Spain. Of course, La Liga is, the prestigious soccer league over there, where, in a country that soccer is king and everything else is very much secondary. And I saw Moreno and Topuria, go to soccer games there, and, there were fans there to greet them. They wanted autographs and they wanted photos. And this is Moreno, who's from Mexico. He's not from Spain, but he is, he's a bilingual athlete. And I think that he can, cross over into many different demographics. How about this also? 1 week after this fight, UFC 290 that he has against Alexandre Pantoja, he's going to be featured in a lucha libre match. Not going to be doing any wrestling, but he's going to be in the corner of a team at Triple Mania in Tijuana, which is, of course, Moreno's hometown. And the captain of the other team is a very, very popular Mexican rapper who has, millions of followers on Instagram. And that's the kind of celebrity that Moreno has become in Mexico. And I think it's it also crosses over into other countries and of course, Latin Americans in the United States. I really think Moreno is really kind of like low key one of the top stars on the UFC roster right now. And if he beats Pantoja and he continues on this run, this guy, the upside is very high for him.
Brett, I won't ask you to break down the Mexican rap scene, but the Mexican MMA scene with Brandon Moreno is maybe the face of it at the moment. This is an opponent, though, he's fought before. He lost to 5 years ago and subsequently was cut from the UFC roster. How much does that matter when we're evaluating what's going to happen when A meets B in Vegas at UFC 290?
Yeah, this is one of those where I just don't think it matters at all, man. I mean, I want to hesitate to say it just doesn't matter even 0% because, it has to, I guess, slightly if they're familiar with one another and one of them is 2-0 over the other. But in reality, man, I just look at Brandon Moreno as a completely different person than he was 5 years ago. In every sense of the word. I mean, technique wise, He's gone through 2 different coaches since then. You know, he's had different training partners. He's just grown up as an individual, and just the confidence that he's got. He's carrying himself completely different. I mean, I would actually sort of relate him to Yair. I mean, that's something that I'm really high on Yair as well, and why I give him a chance to beat Alex Volkanovski is just mentalities. It's just the confidence level that they have to win these big time fights, which for Yair, it's against, you know, an obviously formidable opponent, and one of the bigger stars in the sport, and Alex. But for Brandon, it's a lot of pressure as well. You know, again, going against a guy that you've lost to before. But everything that Marc just said, this guy's getting a ton of opportunities. He's being looked at as the face of Mexican MMA, and so there's a lot of pressure that comes along with that. So I just think personality-wise, these two are just well suited to handle it. And Brandon wasn't when he was on Tough, and he was getting released from the UFC. I mean, UFC doesn't release too many people that they think have a bright future. You know, if they're letting you go, especially if you could captivate the Mexican market, I mean, that just says what their thoughts were on Brandon as a fighter, and also just the flyweight division in general. And now you got the guy just completely reinvigorating it and carrying the banner for the Mexican flag. So to me, it doesn't matter, because Brandon Moreno is just not who he was 5 years ago.
Oh, Carlos, the man who's looking to derail Moreno's, I don't want to say hype train, he's a champion, but derail his momentum is Alexandre Pantoja, a man who, at the very least, has stood across from Moreno a couple times before. What do you think needs to happen for Pantoja to, I guess, sweep the trilogy and become the champion?
Well, as Brad mentioned, I mean, the Pantoja fight was actually what changed Moreno. It's a coincidence. It might be a coincidence, but in that year, it was the same night when Alexa lost to Tatiana Suarez. Brandon lost to Pantoja in the same like couple of month difference. Yair lost to Frankie Edgar. So those 3 losses totally changed them, changed these 3 particular fighters. Brandon went to after that loss, he learned he needed to box. I mean, it's like really odd that a Mexican doesn't have good boxing. Brandon was more into jiu-jitsu and wrestling. He had an interesting high kick that he did damage to Dustin Ortiz and everything, but his striking was not really good. Then he realized that he needed to go I'm in Tijuana. This is one of the best places to find a boxing coach. He found a boxing coach, and his head movement, his striking just improved a lot. And I think the best test to that was the first Kai Kara-France fight, where he was facing a really good kickboxer, and he defeated him. So the fight is gonna be really different. I think Pantoja has a lot of skills, and he's can take your back from so many accurate positions, and he can climb and get you into a submission. But Brandon's jiu-jitsu is really good. He's been really good for a while, and I don't think that should be a threat. I think if Pantoja wants to win this fight, he will have to be better than Brandon in the striking, and he has a great team. He trains with a lot of good partners in American Top Team, but it's gonna be a very different fight. I think when you think about these 3 fights that the Mexican champions have, like Yair against Volkanovski, and the rematch, the eventual rematch between Valentina and Alexa, I think you could say that Brandon is the one that has the better odds to win this fight. So I think Pantoja needs to get into a war with Moreno, like the one they had on the Ultimate Fighter. Not much what happened in Chile. I think it's going to be more of that, and he needs to beat him on the feet, and it's not going to be easy for him.
Yeah, certainly has fight of the night potential when those 2 meet for the UFC flyweight belt. So we have 2 belts on the line at UFC 290. We also have a former champion looking to earn himself yet another shot at his former belt in Bobby Knuckles, Robert Whittaker. Brett Okamoto, this guy's lost to 1 dude in this division. Israel Adesanya, not once, but twice. Dricus du Plessis, yeah, he's unbeaten since his KSW days. But in your estimation, is this too much of a step up for Dricus to be facing Robert Whittaker in Vegas, UFC 290?
Robert Whittaker is too much of a step up for everybody other than Israel Adesanya. You said it yourself, Phil. If you're not at Israel Adesanya, you're losing to Robert Whittaker, and it's up to Dricus to break that trend. But yeah, it's going to be extremely difficult. I mean, I have been sort of the Robert Whittaker fan club perhaps alongside with you, Phil Murphy, but this guy deserves to be in the top 10 pound for pound. I mean, he could be an easily top 6, top 7 guy in the top pound for pound fighters in the world. He only loses to Izzy. And in fact, I'm going to quote the great Marvin Vettori, I believe, who said this, was just like, actually, Robert is better than Israel. It's just that he happens to match up really poorly with Israel. And I don't know if I believe that. I have Israel above Robert Whittaker in my pound for pound standings, but I see what Marvin is saying. Like, Robert is a very difficult matchup for everybody, man. It just so happens that his skill set has not led to a win against Israel yet. So the Dricus has his work cut out for him. And this guy has kind of, and I want to say this delicately because he has been impressive, but he's almost looked like he's going to lose some of these fights before then he ends up winning them. So he's got to fight his best performance. And that was always going to be the case, but especially I think what we've seen out of Dricus, like, you got to come and have the night of your life, Dricus, if you're going to beat Robert Whittaker, because not many people are beating Robert Whittaker, man. So I wouldn't say it's too fast for him. It's appropriate, but of course, Robert's the favorite for a reason.
Yeah, he's been buzzing around and, picking off every middleweight not named Israel in his non-title fights, one of whom was Jared Cannonier. And Marc Raimondi, Cannonier just had a very impressive win over Marvin Vettori at some of the highest significant strike counts we've ever seen. Does the winner of this Whittaker-Duplessis fight, should they have the next title shot at Israel, whether it's in Sydney, or should it be Jared Cannonier for him getting a rematch against Adesanya? How would you matchmake this division for the champion Adesanya's next title fight?
It definitely looks a lot interesting, more interesting now than it did, Phil, after Cannonier's great win against Vettori, because that was a different Jared Cannonier, which is an incredible thing to say at 38 years old, that he's actually still getting better. And he just put the pace on Vettori like we've never seen Cannonier do before. So he's definitely right up there, although his loss to Izzy last year was not super impressive, and I'm not sure if there's anyone really clamoring for that rematch right now. There's also this Sean Strickland versus Abus Magomedov fight that's coming up on Saturday in Vegas, and if Sean Strickland can win that fight, he's on probably a pretty short list of guys who could get Adesanya next for the title shot. The question for me is the timing, right? So if the UFC wants Adesanya in the main event, defending his middleweight title in September in Sydney, will the Whittaker versus Duplessis winner be ready for that date? That's a pretty quick turnaround, just 2 months. I'm not sure if that's going to be the case. So that could be, an opening for a Strickland or a Cannonier. Ultimately, I do think if Whittaker wins, he should get the third fight. He deserves it. He's beaten everybody else in the division, as Brett said. And Duplessis is the guy that Adesanya wants to fight in the first place. I'm not even sure why Whittaker versus Duplessis is happening on July 8th. I mean, I'm not sure if that's a necessary fight for the division because Adesanya wants Duplessis. He's undefeated in the UFC. There's a story there. There's some real life beef going on between them. That would have been a really interesting, main event storyline for that fight. But he's gonna have to go through Whittaker, and Whittaker, as Brett said, he beats everyone who's not Adesanya. So it's gonna be interesting to see how that fight plays out, how Strickland looks against kind of an unknown guy in Abus, and we'll see in the next couple of weeks now what that Sydney card is gonna shape up to be.
International Fight Week every year is the deepest, if not one of the deepest cards. And this year is no different. It's why we get a Robert Whittaker and a Dricus Duplessis, not in the main or co-main, but just elsewhere on the main card. Carlos, I'm going to take the championship fights off the table. I'll include Whittaker Duplessis in there. And Brett and Marc, I do ultimately want your thoughts on this as well, but we'll start with Carlos. What is one fight or fighter, aside from the main and co-main, that you are most looking forward to at UFC 290?
Well, obviously, I'm from Mexico, and is one of the biggest prospects in the female divisions is Jasmine Jauregui. I think she was a Rookie of the Year for ESPN last year. She had an impressive performance in her debut. Even Dana White was there to greet her once she was coming off the cage. So I think if Jasmine can get a win against Denise Gomez, who's a really good striker, it could be a really fun fight. I think she could even get ranked in this after her third fight. So I think it's one of the fight a lot of people are looking for. And definitely Jasmine has a lot of hype. Even she's young, she's undefeated, and a lot of people in Mexico is believing that she's going to be like the next champion. And if ever Mexico ever has another champion, that Jasmine has all the potential. So this is a big step up for her. It's a big card. There's going to be a lot of Mexicans there because there's also Jesus Aguilar and the two Mexican champions. So there's a lot to be it's going to be a lot of Mexican flags in the stand. So I think it's a big test for her and how good she really is.
Brett, same question for you. Whether it's Bo Nickel, it's Bobby Knuckles, it's Jack Della Maddalena, who is somebody aside from the main and co-main that you are most looking forward to, or a fight that you're anticipating most?
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously a lot of potential on this card. The names you just mentioned, like Bo Nickel, Jack Della Maddalena, are two of the best prospects in the sport right now. So, of course, I'm excited to see their development. I got to be honest, though, when I think about the fight I'm going to be most invested in, it's going to be Dan Hooker's fight. And that's because we all love ourselves some Dan Hooker. And he's got such a dangerous guy in front of him in Jalen Turner. If we're just being honest, like, it could go bad for Dan Hooker. And if it does, then he's got some hard questions to answer, but he's been in that position before. But yeah, because of just how much I enjoy Dan Hooker's fights and the spot that he's in. And hey, Jalen Turner, he knows that this is a spot to get a big win over a fan favorite. So, and he's shown an incredible amount of potential as well. So that fight is going to make me nervous, and I'm going to be watching it very, very closely, man. That's the one I'm going to make sure I'm in my seat, and I'm going to be paying close attention to it.
And somebody who's public enemy #1 in Australia and New Zealand, and Jalen Turner, he has wins over Brad Riddell, Jamie Malarkey, and Joshua Kulabau in his last 4 or 5 wins. Marc Raimondi, same question to you. Fight or fighter you're anticipating the most?
Yeah, I'm gonna throw out something that no one has said before. How about Robbie Lawler's retirement fight? One of the most exciting fighters to ever put on the gloves, to ever step in the octagon. He's fighting against Nico Price, which should be a great fight. And by the way, just 2 days earlier, this man is getting inducted into the UFC Hall of Fame for his fight against Rory McDonald, which, by the way, for my money, is the best fight I've ever seen. So I got to give a shout to Robbie Lawler. I'm looking forward to seeing his final fight. And, he's not a guy that he's a man of few words, right? But I'm just curious to see, what this retirement, speech and, what this week looks like for him and all that. But it's a great card. There's something to get for everyone. There's the great prospects. There's, exciting fights. And, but got to give some love to a legend in Ruthless.
Ruthless Robbie Lawler, somebody who debuted in 2002 in the UFC. Fights top to bottom. The card, again, subject to change. So keep it on ESPN.com/MMA, not just for all the updates and news going into this card, but a number of previews and different analyst takes and things to prepare you for what could prove the card of the year. UFC 290 in Vegas, second Saturday in July. For Carlos, Marc, and Brett, I'm Phil. Keep it on ESPN.com/MMA and ESPN MMA's YouTube channel for all the best UFC coverage we have to offer. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.